To go out, is there?
This is going out.
What?
The dome. When you come here, it's called going out. There'll be tears, I expect. Jean-Francois going back to Earth next week.
Oh, I wish I was.
Nothing. Nobody cares. Out of sight, out of mind. Mine's from Bob. Good old Bob. Yeah. 3 brothers and a Highland Terrier, and not one of them bothers to say Happy New Year, Hurley.
He's been asked to a party with a girl called Glenda Albright. But he's going to stay in and mug up for his accountancy Part 2 papers.
Good old Bob.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I'm going to dedicate my life to Fimbo Lewis.
Really?
You know, perhaps I'll marry him and become like one of those awful women in Space Wives.
You say something here that's very peculiar. Something really odd.
Douglas Adams, as the creator of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, how did you react to Jupiter Moon?
Well, I think it's one of these things that only seems like a good idea actually at the planning stage. I mean, so obviously somebody had the idea. You know, soap opera is the big thing at the moment. We've had soap operas set in Melbourne and in Liverpool and the East End of London. Where else can we go? Let's put it into space. And the sort of space aspect of it is sort of applied as icing over the top. Now, the thing is, you can't actually apply your location, your fundamental premise, just as icing. So you have sort of absurd things where just to remind you of where you are in case you haven't been tipped off by these appalling sets that look as if they would have been rejected by Doctor Who. You know, somebody who says, I promise I'll be very careful, says, I'll promise I'll be the most careful man in the universe. And I'm afraid, the thing is absolutely awful. I mean, it's unbelievably bad. I sat there sort of cringing horror at what was going on.
Eve Pollard, did you find it bad?
I found it dreadful. It must have been terrific for the do-it-yourself shop that sold them the sets, all painted grey. And, of course, the interesting thing is there's no age. There's nobody older than 35. So after, 2050, we might as well all give up. And nobody's allowed to be fat. All the girls run around in very sexy cat suits or miniskirts, and they only wear black and white, so obviously colour is being eliminated. It's very, very foolish and very, very dull.
Craig Ferguson, what did you think?
I think it's the daftest thing I've ever seen a camera pointed at in my life, actually. It's really stupid. The idea of there's something really scary that's going around this spaceship called Space Virus, which sounds really imaginative to me. And when people have aspirins, they don't have aspirin. It's not aspirin, it's a little more advanced than that. And it's just really crazy. And the fact that, like Eve was saying, now everyone's really young. And the fact that they have discos in space, which look as embarrassing as discos look now when they're filmed by the BBC. They just look really, really stupid.
Well, now, none of you liked it. I can't say I was crazy about it myself. But the fact of the matter is that people have put a lot of money into it. There are 150 episodes in production. This surely must mean they're not fools, these people. They're there to make money. This surely must mean that there must be something in it which they think will attract viewers.
Well, they haven't put it in the first programme, have they? Whatever it is.
They're keeping, and also there's no Kylie or Jason. There's no heartthrob that you can see anybody might, get attracted to. And there's nothing even that you could compare your sitting room to, as you might to Neighbours or Coronation Street. There's no heart in it at all, as far as I can see.
You can't really relate to any of the characters, can you?
No.
I actually cannot envisage how such a thing is actually going to succeed. The thing is, when you look at something like Neighbours or whatever, then, however basic the scripts may be, they are actually sustained by a sense of place and the regularity of these people's lives, because it's something we actually know about, and the people making it know something about it.
Yet they exist in a vacuum, these people, don't they?
And because there's no attempt to fill in that vacuum. To write science fiction, you actually have to create a universe, which is very, very difficult to do, and you have to do it very, very carefully, because you don't want to sort of drive it at people. But you have to be very, very clear about what it is.
But nobody's going to be able to pop down to the pub or go to the hospital, because none of these things exist. At least if they are, they're making them up desperately right now, and it's all painted grey.
They might really have had the whole thing on Earth. There's not much point in having it in a spaceship.
Well, don't you think they just
they
thought
can keep
there
it in a
is...
studio. If you have it on a spaceship, you can keep it in a studio for the entire thing. You don't need to have pubs in. But if they've got so much money, why not go down to the pub and film down there? I really think that it sounds really nasty, because you're really getting the boot into their soap opera, but they really should know a bit better than that. Come on.
Don't you think they just thought, where isn't there a soap? And that was the only place so far.
All right, fine. Well, thanks very much. We'll move on now to first edition. an hour-long daily current affairs program presented by Selina Scott and Peter Smith. Last Thursday's program featured studio interviews on the subject of kidney transplants, another with the businesswoman of the year who runs a multi-million-pound bus company, a chilling piece from New York about a man whose wife was murdered because he tried to get rid of the local drug barons, fashion, film reviews, and a wrong forecast of the winner of the Grand National. And Selina introduced this item about how in these changing times, jobs are changing too.
Now, trawlermen on the northeast coast of the UK are going through a tough time just now. Dozens of boats are up for sale, and 1 in 10 fishermen could soon be out of a job. Some of them have found themselves surprising new careers on land, making cream cakes. Tonight's Sign of the Times looks at the trawlermen who've traded in their fish nets for hair nets.
The fishermen of Bridlington are a hardy breed. A life on the ocean waves always had its ups and downs. But this is one storm they're not prepared to ride out. With the local fleet high and dry, dozens of trawlermen have decided to desert the industry. 50 former fishermen have now landed jobs at this local cake factory, swapping their oilskins for hair nets and protective plastic gloves. The management regard the trawlermen as quite a catch.
We find that they are used to hard work, and so therefore it's quite easy for them to fit in the establishment. Every time we recruit, we seem to take on board another fisherman.
And what does the editor of the Sunday Mirror think of this programme?
I quite like it in a way. I mean, I can see where it's going. I mean, it's very clearly signposted. It's a mix between a magazine and a paper. So you have the sports item at the end, i.e. the back of it, and you have the cover story at the front. And it does do stories from a human sort of side. I mean, the story about the GIs at the front, which was not political at all, but about the Cold War ending and perhaps more Americans going back, and how these British brides are going to have to acclimatise themselves to moving away from Britain.
I thought that was interesting.
Rather nice, and
yeah.
had a certain amount of heart.
Yeah.
The kidney story was quite nice. It was unfortunate, I think, that Selina did the interview in what appeared to be a fairly tidy corner of Luton Airport. But
yes, it was a dreadful set there, wasn't it?
Dreadful. Yeah. You can see why Pebble Mill and all those other places that have windows have done it. But it was an interesting aspect. On the day that that doctor had been removed, as it were, and defrocked and struck off the list.
I thought Selina did some very sharp questioning there. I thought,
yes. I think she's a star,
she's
and she comes over really strongly.
Yes,
it's given her a chance.
Craig, what did you feel about it?
I would agree Selina Scott is a star, but whether or not that gives validity to the news programme, I don't know. I mean, you could have Liz Taylor read the news, it wouldn't make it any better. The thing I thought about it is it reminded me of all these really crappy little things you get in the tabloid newspapers, you know, these tiny little stories, you know, the badger goes mad in Bridlington and stuff like that, and there's only enough for 5 lines or something, but they make a whole big story out of it. I mean, like they had the story about the GI brides of today, where they had the GI brides and the GIs acting in the programme, this kind of like mock drama documentary, which I thought was sad, although the acting was much better than in Jupiter Moon, it's got to be said. But I thought it was a little bit flippant. I think it's got promise, as you say. It could go on to be like cable network news in America, but I don't think it can aspire much higher than that.
I felt that they called it a new programme, or a new style current affairs programme. It didn't seem to me to be all that different from the old Nationwide.
No, well, I was just about to say, I thought, I felt watching it, I was actually longing for the great days and majestic achievements of Nationwide. I felt, particularly the thing that Craig just talked about, the GIs. I mean, there's sort of terrible little sort of home movies. Hello, I'm Pippa, and this is my husband, Al. And Al comes on and says, hello. And it's just sort of embarrassing. Yeah. And then the piece about the trawlermen. There's sort of terrible commentary, I wrote some of it down here, about, the fishermen of Bridlington are a hardy breed, a life on the ocean wave has always had its ups and downs, and they decided to desert to the industry. Just these sort of appalling puns which seem to be, a substitute for any serious way of dealing with this issue. And it was actually quite an interesting story, but it's given this sort of terrible sort of down market.
And tell me something I didn't understand. That before we got into that issue, we saw a picture of a dog peeping out from the legs of some Girls, I didn't understand what the object of
I
that
think they were showgirls of the 50s, and it was a sort of signpost, sign of the times, i.e. signs that things are changing.
I thought it was a badger going mad.
May I say, some of those fillers, as they're known in newspapers, are some of the most successful